I cannot stop playing Sekiro. I'm not much of a replayer of games. I mostly give a select few another go after a good 3 years or so, and there are some favorites of mine like Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War, Shadow of Mordor, and Inside, which I haven't revisited, period. The only series that I've consistently gone back to is my favorite franchise of all time, Uncharted. Ever since I first played 3 in 2013, I've been playing it every year since, and after 4 and the Nathan Drake collection came out, I've been playing the entire series on a yearly basis. For the most part though, when I'm done with a game, I'm done with it for some time. I might replay it once or twice immediately after finishing it, almost exclusively to unlock its platinum, like another one of my absolute favorites, Bloodborne, but the urge to go back and experience these games again doesn't hit for quite some time, even if they add new updates. Like, I'm probably not gonna go back to Returnal till 2024 or something, even with Ascension. If Uncharted is the exception to the rule though, I don't even know what to call Sekiro. Despite it being a popular criticism early on from some Souls fans to say that it didn't have the replayability of From Software's previous games because of a lack of build variety, in the 3 years since it's released, I've played Sekiro more times than I've played any game in my entire life, and with me on yet another playthrough right now, I think it's a great time to discuss what exactly it does that makes it so fun to come back to. In early 2019 when Sekiro first came out, I played it as a FromSoft virgin, and it chewed me up and spit me out the other side, a hardened soldier that had seen far too much. 2 replays secured me the platinum, and then I put the game up on my shelf, but the itch to return to it was a lot more intense than anything I'd played before. The only thing really stopping me from picking it back up again was the fact that I wanted to forget some of the boss patterns and locations so it'd be as fresh an experience as possible next time, but the second it gave me a reason to come back a touch over a year and a half later with an official boss rush mode, I didn't even hesitate. I booted it right up the day the update went live. Now, I hadn't played in a year and a half, and even though I'd gotten pretty good at the bosses after my push for the platinum, I was sure I'd be plenty rusty coming in here. The way the boss rush worked was that there were 3 smaller lineups for you to face, which cumulatively included basically every boss in the game, and on beating all 3 of those, you unlocked the full boss rush mode. Any of the 3 smaller runs took about 10 to 15 minutes each, and the main one landed at about 40 to 50 minutes for a successful run, meaning if you booted the game up and got through everything on your first try, this whole ordeal would take you about an hour and a half. I'd actually already checked this information before starting the boss rush, basically how long each trial took, and the time I estimated it would take for me to finish this mode was about 15 hours. I hadn't played the game in a while, like I said. I was horrible at Sekiro to start off with. I've never been all that skilled at games in general, to be honest. This is one of the hardest collections of bosses in modern gaming, and even if I went straight to the main 17 boss challenge, each failed run would likely take on average 20 to 30 minutes, so all in all, 15 hours to master this well enough to beat the 3 mini challenges and full boss rush without dying felt pretty reasonable. Imagine my surprise then when I was looming over Ishin the Sword Saint, a boss that had taken me 3.5 hours to beat once on his own during my first playthrough, now defeated after I had killed 16 bosses before him without a single death a mere 4 hours since I had decided to start up this new mode. Mastery over the unconquerable. That's one of the essential reasons that Sekiro is so much more replayable than any game I've played. Nothing came easily to me when I first played Sekiro. Not a single boss, not a single area. Everything felt impossible at first and took my blood, sweat, tears, and drywall to overcome, but once I did, I felt like I had truly mastered something. Sekiro's bosses do rely heavily on pattern recognition, but while memorization is a key aspect in being able to deal with your foes, muscle memory alone can't save you. Any attack can come at any time. Some attacks have variations. Sometimes you're interrupted during offense and need to recognize the sign to back off and protect yourself. The tougher the challenge you need to overcome, the more your instincts are sharpened, and the inner version of bosses in the boss rush mode is proof of that. Inner Genichiro, Inner Owl, and Inner Ishin are twists on their original versions in the base game with a few added moves and abilities. They're not complete reworkings by a long shot, but their new moves are sometimes brain breakers after you've been accustomed to a specific moveset for so long. Despite these abilities being pretty disruptive and powerful though, I still beat Inner Genichiro on my first try, Inner Owl on my second, and Inner Ishin also on my first. That's not a flex, by the way. To prove it, here's roughly how long each of their base game versions took me to beat in 2019, but it is proof that muscle memory and pattern recognition aren't all that lead to your success in this game. You can potentially pick it up after years, and with one practice run at any boss, you can shish kebab them the next time. That's mastery. When I replayed Bloodborne earlier this year, a game that I'd first played after Sekiro in 2019, I noticed that while I was doing better than I did the first time, I still had trouble keeping up with some bosses, reading certain tells, recognizing when to back off, etc. And in some ways that's a good thing. The challenge is still there and the game can still surprise you, but ultimately a replay of Bloodborne, as fun as it always will be, probably won't ever feel as good as the first time I played it. And that's how it is with most games, because you get a similar experience that's a little bit diluted because you've already done this. I'm still overcoming bosses and exploring new areas, but it can't compare to the first time I beat these bosses and discovered these places. In Sekiro's case though, the dynamic feels like it's completely 180. You go from the game beating you up to you beating the game up on a dime. Every replay of Sekiro is a chance to completely obliterate everything that hurt you the first time through, and while in other games that shift might happen a lot slower after more attempts and through acquiring better weapons and upgrades, sides. The way Sekiro forces you to become so in tune with its streamlined combat makes that change much faster and emphasizes your enhanced skill over prioritizing better items and abilities on subsequent playthroughs. I didn't stop replaying Sekiro after that late 2020 boss rush mode though. No, on 5 separate occasions I played the Sekiro boss rush in 2021. I just get the urge, throw in the disc, run the boss rush, and do it again a few months later. And I think the reason I played it almost as a comfort game that I kept coming back to is because of the infectious tempo that it has. Sekiro makes you pay attention at all times, but it can also turn into this relaxing back and forth once you understand what's coming. Enemy attacks all land at a certain pace, and once you faced off against that enemy enough, you'll have that pace engraved into your brain, which means defense becomes a little rhythm game in and of itself. I actually have another video on my channel from way back dedicated to just Sekiro's combat, and it's horrible. Nobody go watch it, seriously. It keeps getting more popular for some reason, and people in the comments are supportive, which is nice, but oh my god, I went back and tried to watch it and I couldn't get past the 20-second mark. It's truly awful. But one point that I actually liked when reading the script back for that video was that Sekiro's defense is made infinitely more engaging because of the posture system, and that simple mechanic basically ascends this combat to an untouchable level. The tension involved in a parry in games that create large offensive openings and counters as a result is great, and so is pinpoint dodging that you can use to increase your own attack windows. But I don't think anything can come close to how good it feels to pull off a string of defensive moves in Sekiro. Not only does it move to a fun rhythm, but oftentimes playing intelligent defense can do more harm to your enemy than if you started hacking away at them. As you increase their posture while remaining mindful of yours, every slight misstep not necessarily immediately screwing you over, but instead increasing the tension further by bringing your bar up, and every shake-up by the boss forcing you to stay on your toes and pull off pogos and Makiri counters after you've been lulled into a sense of security. Balancing the power of the player and the enemy is always difficult. You want the player to feel like they're really making a dent with every move, but you also want the boss to be imposing, and it's hard to have both. Lots of really tough bosses out there have brief windows to punish, and the player needs to spend a lot of time rolling out of the way or avoiding attacks that can completely zap their health bar. It's fun, but imbalanced. You spend a lot more time protecting yourself than actually doing damage. In Sekiro, any strike can spell serious danger, and yet if you choose to meet it head on, you can flip every one of them back onto your enemy. It rewards bravery and makes it so that any move from either you or your foe can go either way depending on how you react. Most Soulsborne bosses feel like you're part of a dance-off. They make a move, you make a move, it's in the same place and you are reacting to one another, but they are ultimately individual movements. But the way Sekiro sets up an enemy's ability to counter your moves and begin attacking, as well as the unbelievably intuitive posture system, makes these bosses feel more like a salsa dance where you're actually intertwined with one another. And that rhythmic synergy makes the game feel like a song that you can't get out of your head. Eventually you just gotta cave and listen to it again. Maybe the biggest reason why I love going back to Sekiro though is how straightforward it is. After my replays of the boss rush in 2021, I decided to play the full game again after Elden Ring released, and then I played it again and again, and I'm pretty sure I put in at least 10 playthroughs during a single month. I incorporated some speedrun tactics and just went ham. I played Sekiro more times in that month than I played my second most replayed game of all time, Uncharted 3, in my entire life. Not to mention I beat the boss rush another 3 times, and here I am months later playing the game once more, probably for another 5+ times. I think what's so appealing about Sekiro is that it manages to strip itself from the RPG elements and slow traversal of its cousins while still maintaining their all gameplay all the time attitude. I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but I hate the thought of going back to an RPG. I know some people love it, but I don't want to figure out a new build. I don't want to have to upgrade weapons again. I don't want to have to make decisions or grind out currencies. All of those things are things I think about when I start contemplating booting up a game again, and they always make me hesitate. And then for any game, RPG or not, I think about the boring stretches where my movement is restricted or the game decides to take all my stuff away or how long the cutscenes can get. Things I never have an issue with the first time around, but god, I have a hard time rationalizing replaying something like Red Dead 2 when all I can think about is the slow beginning, the clunky controls, and the length of the campaign. I love that game, I just don't feel like dealing with that right now, you know? I don't think any of those problems are apparent in Sekiro. All the cutscenes are short, skippable, and not crucial to your enjoyment like they would be in a narrative-driven game. There's like 2 choices in the whole thing, and they're not even a sentence long. There are skill and upgrade trees, but realistically, I only ever use like 2 of each, so that's not an issue at all. Any annoying areas can almost always be sprinted and grappled through. The most irritating bosses are all optional. The movement is so quick and fluid that you never have moments where you think, man, this was fine the first time, but it's really throwing off the pace of this replay. Everything is just unencumbered and welcoming, or at least as welcoming as a game that's been known to make grown men cry out of sheer frustration can be, I guess. Sekiro feels like it's not tied down by any restrictions that would make you want to avoid a replay, and while it may lack the variety of every other From Software game, it makes up for it by being the best of the bunch at truly enhancing player skill, creating the video game equivalent of an earworm, and being so easy to slip back into. And I think a lot more people are realizing just how enjoyable it is to go back and replay this game. If you have played it and haven't done that already, then I highly recommend that you do, and you might just see that Sekiro is one of the most replayable games of the last few years. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave it a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.